Welcome to Antler River Poetry's February event. I'm Jennifer Quinton from London Public Library. First of all, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Huron-Wendat, and Neutral Chinooktans peoples. The First Nations communities of our local area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. Antler River Poetry values the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island or North America. We also acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada and the importance of directly addressing these injustices in daily life. Antler River Poetry would like to thank our generous event sponsors, including the London Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council for the Arts, the London Public Library, digibee.net, Goose Lane Editions, and Mansfield Press. Please note that the most recent books by our February feature readers are available for purchase through the links in the video description below. More than ever, Antler River Poetry believes in the importance of supporting small press publishers and your local independent bookstores. Before the reading begins, we have an important announcement. Antler River Poetry is currently accepting submissions for our 2022 Open Theme Poetry Contest. Our judge is acclaimed poet Claire Duplessis. First prize will be $100, second prize will be $75, and third prize will be $50. Submit one poem of no more than 40 lines on any topic in any style to antlerriverpoetrycontest@gmail.com by the deadline of March 15th, 2022. All poems must be original work that has not been published anywhere else. You must live or attend school in London, Ontario, and area to enter the contest. Winning poets will have their poems published on the Antler River Poetry website and will read their work live at our Zoom event on April 20th, 2022. Please consult our website, www.poetrylondon.ca, for all of the details. This month, Antler River Poetry's feature readers are Síle Englert and Jason Heroux, who will be introduced by Arlene Perret and Stuart Ross, respectively. We are also very pleased to welcome our February local opener. Kit Roffey is a student at Huron College at Western University, finishing a major in English and Cultural Studies and a minor in Psychology. They were the winner of the 2021 Antler River Poetry Contest, and their work has appeared in Prairie Fire and Stratford Quarterly.
Hi, my name is Kit, and I'm going to be reading a couple poems today. The first is about a bird, and it's called Chickadee. The chickadee is a child's body in the summer, lying prone in the grass. The chickadee is my body at 5 years old, playing graveyard with the neighbor, a game I almost never won that would leave me stained green and sullen when I came back to life too soon and couldn't contain my itching. The chickadee is only one of many birds that have appeared under the Douglas fir, with claws curled inwards and wings tucked tightly against damp feathers, when death has come a season early, before the first snow has had time to hit. There is something to be said for decomposition and letting the pine needles overtake small, static chest, but nature won't allow for that kind of peace, and neither will my father with a green grocery bag swinging from his hand. I can see the small clump weighing down inside, a relic of flight, and my father doesn't even tear up as I suck my tongue to the roof of my mouth. I am back in the grass again, 2 long arms and one eye partially open. I am a sore loser again, trying not to let my disappointment show. My mother explains away these deaths, bacterial growth in an overfilled feeder, poisoned by what was desperately searched out for in a way that feels like her voice calling me back inside when the streetlights flickered. There will be no resurrection for these victims, even as they are pulled from air tombs. There can be no justice if there is no man with an axe, or a too fast car. Accidental killer, the person that loved them enough to walk along dew-caked grass, chilled by October before the sun has come in full, thin housecoat tied tight, bag of cracked corn and sunflower seeds in hand. And maybe I was mimicking loss too wholeheartedly when I contorted myself into a tableau of something that I couldn't have predicted. A body tone like a printer running out of ink and a clasped beak. and maybe I was never the chickadee at all, but the person flying out feed. The second poem is admittedly still unfinished, but I like the beginning of it, so I'm going to read it for you today. It's called To Lean, to Press, to Pull, to Hold. 1. There are places where gentle folds like waves obscure, newly formed clusters of sand speck freckles and scars, smooth and worn as banded beach granite. Skin on skin is too hot when your stomach holds space for the bare curve of a hip bone as you bend to the left to rest against love's strong shoulder. 2. This is where you pick up a violin. Or is it a viola? Your fingers don't remember lifting only to soften when your orchestra teacher wasn't looking. There's no one to hide tender violet welts from now, but still, you bend knuckles and curl around strings full force. 3. When the stalks of mint on the windowsill start to topple over, you plug in the kettle. You know the right way to pluck leaves between your thumb and index, to wait for the rolling boil before palm connects to handle and pours. When the steam begins to clear, you are an apparition, so cool and sharp and incandescent. 4. This is when you begin to slip hands into hands, arms hyperextended to find counterbalance, leaning away, stretching arms, wrist, hands, hands, wrists, arms of the other. When your back hits the floor, you catch the sun, slipping through the blinds to spread stripes across your chest. It warms you through the ache and itch of the carpet, exposes spots of dust that float and fall, and you inhale. Thank you.
It is with great delight and a real sense of honor that I introduce the reading tonight. Síle Englert, whom some of you must already know, will be reading from her debut full-length collection, The Lost Time Accidents. She is an innovative, inventive voice in Canadian poetry, and her new collection highlights her uniqueness. She's not only a poet, she also writes fiction and is an artist who designs tattoos, cards, and animation. She also knits. Her work has appeared in numerous literary journals. As well, she's the author of 2 previous chapbook collections, the Phobic's Handbook in 2020 and Threadbare in 2019. Her poetry has placed second in CV2's 2-day poem contest and has been shortlisted for ARC's Poem of the Year. Her writing is known for its linguistic musicality, its whimsy, its fearlessness, and its empathy. The Lost Time Accidents demonstrates her passion for trivia and for what lies beneath the surface of life, the underbelly, detritus, decomposition, death, and magic. This book generates wonder. The impulse of Síle's work is to shine a light. In the long conversation that is poetry, it is unusual to find poems that touch on the topics she presents in this book. You are in for a rare treat. Be prepared to be amazed as Síle Englert reads from her new collection, The Lost Time Accidents.
Backstitch. The subtle wrongness of this house is grinning in the windows, deliberate slant that always lets the sunlight scratch her bones and sends its glinting slices spinning off the needle, or malicious rainbows circle, dizzy on her mending. Points of light burning through the stitches in a photograph make her wary of the brightly glowing places on her skin. Her mother taught her how to stitch, her father how to skin and etch a likeness onto paper in the shadow by the windows, to sew around the edges of a figure in a photograph, making seams of places where memory meets bone. There are waterfalls of pages as she tries to do the mending. She holds them still like love notes impaled upon a needle. Dusty voices mumble through her present while the needle hems a foggy landscape to the borders of their skin. They argue, raspy whispers, when her hours fill with mending, and their color fades each time she leaves them by the windows. Her mother said, "You stitch these lines in white and make them bones. There's no other way to find the framework of a photograph." Her father said, "If you're brave enough to slice open a photograph, there's no other way to tidy up the mess than with a needle." And did you know that once they were all carved from sharpened bones? There are places where their egress still leaves marks under her skin, like sepia voices pouring in with sunset from the windows, flooding with their old book smell the annals of the mending. She sits for crawling hours, patching holes in dreams and mending hands and faces from the torn strips of a photograph, while her mother and her father peer inside the windows. She weaves a wounded pattern through the paper with her needle. Borders blur at intervals, and stitches creep over her skin, the glint of metal soaking up the white of sharpened bones. Mouths and eyes are panes of glass, and wood composes bone that pours with paper faces, swirls with dust motes from her mending. Her mother told her how to mark the patterns on their skin, with fragmentary lines of chalk suturing a photograph. Her father would remind her how to dip and pull the needle, but she blinks against the rainbows smirking at her from the windows. Bones may come unstitched and leave a stack of rotting photographs. A needle-trailing thread will always move toward the mending. Sometimes, she says, it breaks the skin, but often just the windows.
Hello, my name is Síle Englert. I'm going to be reading today from my new book, The Lost Time Accidents, which just came out with Goose Lane's poetry imprint, Icehouse Poetry, in October. First, I'd like to say thank you to Antler River Poetry for having me, and to everyone watching, thank you for spending this time with me. I'm an artist as well as a writer, and I've tried to incorporate some of my visual art into the video for this reading, so I hope you'll enjoy that as well. The Lost Time Accidents is divided into 3 sections, and I'm going to read a few poems from each one. The first is themed around girlhood, womanhood, and motherhood. Each poem in the second section is written about a historic person or event where something important was lost. And the third section holds themes of environmental crisis and social issues. I'd like to think of the book as a whole as a sort of museum for lost and broken things, and I hope that you'll find some treasure inside. This body as a Rube Goldberg machine. In the great war of your limbs versus the furniture, it's true what they don't say about the sixth sense, proprioception, awareness of what space a body occupies, to move a world around inside a world. On the smallest of scales, when atoms collide, you observe the mechanics of reverberation. The tiniest tilt of bone at one extreme of your blood and meat universe creates a ripple effect, dominoes through every muscle and joint. You discover the trigger in a cat's eye marble falling from your hand. At point of impact, its weight turns a carousel, tugs the thread that holds you upright toward a candle flame. A red balloon is released at a needle and bursts, startling the mouse, which runs nowhere inside its wheel. This is how you wave goodbye, enter a room, kiss goodnight. Muscles function as pulleys, red rabbit holes and narrow bridges, cantilever hands, air or speech displaced by one wing grazing another. This is how your fingers grasp other fingers. In falling, gravity does the work for you. Machine cobbled from an uncertain set of bones, wrapped in a scar-colored nightgown. Toes catch on the sag of love-worn hand-me-downs. It goes tumbling, misstep, ricochet. These elbows, these hips blooming dark underneath, your shadow like a boy stitched to the wrong side of his skin, that ink spilled in water look. To achieve balance between this body and the world's sharp edges, separate depth perception into its component parts. Give them their own sentences. Lack of depth, lack of perception. Expect unexpected corners. See how multiple surfaces occupy the same planes, the whole house Picassoed into dangerous angles. Cut the words kinetic and perpetual into individual letters. Use them to patch the damaged areas. Accept that you do not know how to work this machine. Beetroot. I used to press my girl dolls together at their painted lips, like each could eat the other's pain and push it back wholly. I understood that I was rotting inside, that God was a he and he was watching, his smile all teeth, offering candy in exchange for my skin. The day before, I crawled out from under the news, damp and fluttering. I was the woman with bees in her eyes, crying sugar tears instead of salt to fill their gaping mouths with sweetness. In the kitchen, the beetroot nested in my palm was a hardened heart, excised. I pressed the knife in, butchered the green of its limbs, purple-veined leaves dissected, fruitless on the cutting board. Beet blood lingers after dinner, and the evidence is in my hands. The day before, I clawed through that dream where I was a white cotton sheet stained like Turin's shroud, the faces of two women on a bus rusting into me when they refused to kiss for men, their mouths and eyes reduced to an absence. So many holes to fill, and time is running away. In the kitchen, I learned my carving from the beetroot, how to gut, remove stalk and peel, how to be only an organ. There are lines to be drawn on these bodies and cuts to be divided. The day before, I was the girl with two hearts, and one of them had to be removed. I left it on the cutting board. I was a tooth knocked loose. I was a fractured orbital socket, the umbra wrung into anemic skin. I was honey. There are days now when I am less afraid to hold her hand on a bus or kiss on the street. Nights when only a rock is thrown or some stray words knife through from a passing car. I might feel like more than holes to fill, more flesh than empty space, or use a gentler word for God. Whatever persists when all disposable parts are cut away. In the kitchen, I bleed on someone else's hands. The ashes of Mrs. Reginald Hargreaves. This is not a rabbit hole, and that leftover gray is only her dust. They call it cremains because there is no uncertainty in a portmanteau. What's left has been burned. It's difficult to say ashes, even though there's a whisper, a lisp to the word, like the sound they'd make if the wind lifted and scattered them. If we listened. When mine blur like hers with grit, humus, the crawling things occupying dark and damp, will you remember what's left under this stone once had tea with the Mad Hatter and managed impossible things before breakfast? if a man with a pen hadn't written her into Wonderland, kept her tucked between covers, inside libraries, where words and ink decay more slowly, where chewing insects aren't invited. Alice's grave might not have worn her name at all, but should have said this. Somewhere between birth and Mrs. Hargreaves, there was an Alice who spoke to flowers, ate strange mushrooms, Alice who swam in a lake of her own tears, Alice who found another world too large and too small to fit inside her own story, her own body. Death is a kind of magic, a walking, speaking thing like Alice, with breathing lungs and beating heart is broken down, stripped for component parts into wife, mother. Everyone averts their eyes when cross-hatched lines and paper molded in the shape of a girl are fed back to dirt. Underground is not Wonderland, just the place where Alice dissolved, the matter she walked around in, interlaced again with everything. The same wondering hums in my own particles, millions of twitching atoms writing pages, hearts, and caterpillars. Rooted through 364 unbirthdays, the elements of a girl who wasn't quite Alice and me tangled the day we were born. Voyager 1 sings to her sister. In 37 years of half-sleep, I've gone day-blind, forgotten what morning looks like. I can't see anything but stars. What's a morning? It's just an idea, the space between dark and noon. We liked to measure things then. You'll know when you finally leave the sun behind. Tell me about Earth. There was a woman who insisted she could smell the dawn, and it made me angry. It was only dirt and leaves warming in the sun, and that should have been enough. Will you sing to me? I only remember one song, about the woods, the evergreens, a guitar. I remember language, warmth, and birds. What are birds? Kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, genus Aves. They have wings, not like ours. I had a picture here somewhere, but I've forgotten how to see it. It's so dark between the stars. Are we birds? We're snails, turtles, maybe hermit crabs, carrying our homes on our backs, the code in our cells. We're the message in a bottle. But no, we're not birds. Tell me about Earth. There was a boy who cried when he learned about meteors, about extinction. Oh, poor dinosaurs, he said. I didn't wonder until we flew beyond that last planet whether any of them would cry for us. What does interstellar mean? It means the space between stars, where we are only what we remember. It means trying to measure darkness with no dawn coming. And you are always so far behind. Tell me about Earth. Shh. Listen. They're playing our song. I heard them dancing to it after we burned the sky. Diaphilia. Would it be simpler to think of your petals as consistently white, or that something as benign as rain, which wears rock down, remember, couldn't turn them transparent? You mumble something about blood and water, adages and aphorisms, or glass-wing butterflies, how leaves and other insects gleam under their wings. Sand isn't enough armor, even when you burn it. Have you ever seen the X-ray of a seashell? Fibonacci curls spiraling inward on each other. how pufferfish bones might convince you in a photograph that they intertwine. Think of that cephalopod teapot with tentacles curled around spout and handle, or the words cephalopod teapot, and then, in your thoughts, transpose them. Make them crystalline, like those disturbing books from when you were small, where the red-eyed vampire rabbit exsanguinates vegetables. Leaves them pale and empty, lifeless. You'd have to use words like hyaline and gossamer. On your lunch break, you realized you could convince a spinach leaf it was human heart tissue by stripping it of its memories. Vitreous, that's the other word. How you persuaded it to beat. Newborn cells clinging to leaf veins didn't know their fabricated flesh was a window. A ghost shrimp or glass frog, tortoiseshell beetle, those soft sounds, vowels and S's all coming back to glass. Not every creature evolves camouflage. Some of them see right through you.
Will you hold this for me? Under your tongue, the place where you keep the most brittle words, ink-stained gums, as if you were thirsty enough to drink water from a tainted stream. Palms cupped, flesh bowl, swallow the nausea. Each drop slick between fingers would be a loss to grieve. A left-hand glove, a lover's middle name, the letter E. Will you take it? Once stamped fragile in red or softly compromised, veined with rooting cracks, now I think what's left to hold is only small. An animal patched together from bird bones and feathers, if you look at it from the right angle. There, the tilt. There, light bends around a necklace of vertebrae, but not a bird, some other hollow-boned body. Reanimated by your breath, it will twitch and jerk, but never breathe on its own. Hear the cartilage pop like clattering teeth. This is what a poem looks like underneath. The bare abdomen after autopsy, a blueprint scrawled on the underside of flesh, a map of veins suddenly exposed. It craves warmth, must be pressed against the chest like this, kept warm. No, like this. Remember the people haunting the hospital, intubated preemies clasped in their cautious fingers, little half-ghosts, translucent as paper dolls held up to the light, and the babies, too. It's like this. Sometimes there is only touch, whirled in a nest of hands, or clinging to a smooth belly for its heat, the fragments of a dropped egg reattached, clumsily. Scars patched with pyrite. Call its glint fool's gold, but don't tell me I should never have cracked my ribs and offered. Let the air touch it, invited decay and examination. Don't say corrosive. Don't say I've forgotten to bury this broken part, so it has to be carried. As weight dissolves, it grows dense, heavier. I've been holding dark matter, keeping it from dripping down and seeping into the dirt. I only know aching arms and this question. Will you keep it, just for a while? There's only a little while left when you understand a single day as the most fragile thing of all.
Hi there, this is Stuart Ross speaking to you from my basement hideaway here in Cobourg, Ontario. It's a real privilege to introduce to you my friend and colleague Jason Heroux for his appearance today at the Antler River Poetry Reading Series. There are just a few poets in Canada whose work instantly makes friends with new readers, even if those readers are not habitual fans of poetry, and Jason is one of those rare poets. Jason Heroux is the author of 4 full-length poetry collections, as well as about a dozen chapbooks and 3 short novels. His poetry has been translated into French, Italian, and Arabic, and has been published widely in Canada and internationally as well. Jason is currently shaking up and delighting the Kingston, Ontario writing community in his position as the city's poet laureate. His most recent books are the 2016 poetry collection, Hard Work Cheering Up Sad Machines, and the 2018 novel, Amusement Park of Constant Sorrow. It's very telling that both those titles evoke both joy and melancholy. The worldview I find in Jason's work is one of existential angst and looming mortality, and at the same time, ordinary joys and pleasures. Even at his darkest, Jason's lines swim in a kind of gentle playfulness. One of Jason's poems in his 2012 collection, Natural Capital, begins, "I have a pet blade of grass I keep in a cage. I feed it dirt to help it grow." These 5 spare lines, each word so simple and yet so precisely chosen, say a lot about Jason's poetry as well as his fiction. He is dedicated to the preciousness and even the mysteriousness of the most simple things. A blade of grass, a spoon, a running shoe, an ant. But his work also expresses a kind of existential wonder before more elemental things, the sky, sunlight, the breath, and time. In A Guide to Keeping Chickens from Hard Work Cheering Up Sad Machines, Jason writes, "A day lasts a day and a plum lasts a plum." There's a mindfulness throughout Jason's poetry and prose. We may be cursed by the absurdity of our existence, but we can also revel in that absurdity. Again, it's a real delight to introduce you to the profound pleasures of Jason Heroux.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Heroux. I'm thrilled to be here at the 18th season of Antler River Poetry, formerly Poetry London. Thank you, Antler River Poetry, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for being here and watching. I'm going to start by reading some poems gathered from my 4 books of poems and some recent work as well. And in the second half, I'll read a few prose poems from a manuscript I'm currently working on. So let's get started. The first poem I'll read is the first poem in my first book of poetry. The book is called Memoirs of an Alias, and the poem is called Story. It was loosely inspired by a true event. One day in Kingston, Ontario, I saw an old artificial lake lying on the side of the road. I'd never seen one before. A part of me wanted to take it home, but another part of me said, no, don't do that. So I ended up writing a poem about it instead. Story. One summer night, a stranger threw an artificial leg onto my lawn, made of plastic, leather, steel. Sunday, my neighbor put on a yard sale. He rang my bell and swore, "Christ, you got to get rid of that thing, because people think I'm trying to sell it. I'm losing business." All our yards are jammed together. My other neighbor grows a garden in hers and throws a tattered trench coat and fedora over the for sale sign in my yard to frighten off birds. I haven't received mail in weeks. Last night, I carried the leg to the lake and threw it into the dark blue sheets of water, where it thrashed as if waking from a terrible dream. The next poem I'll read is called Life in Life in a Novel. The trouble started when the light bulbs began to burn out in the novel. The author never replaced them. We realized we were on our own and could do whatever we wanted. I was originally just another nobody in an overcrowded paragraph, a stranger with a distant look on his face, carrying a black umbrella, who passes the happy couple in the street. Now I'm the only character left, digging graves in the cold, hard ground with my umbrella. I'm afraid the next person who picks up this novel off their shelf will die of shock after seeing what we've done to ourselves. I'll read a few poems from my second collection called Emergency Hallelujah. This poem is called Talking About the War. As we sat outside after dinner one evening, talking about which colors to paint the rooms of our house, it suddenly seemed we were really talking about the war. The trees rustled, the sky grew dark, and the full moon glowed with a powerless light. We sat outside for a while longer and said nothing at all, and it still seemed we were talking about the war. One of the things I like about Kingston is that it has a fair amount of second-hand thrift stores, one of which inspired this poem called Thrift Shop. A thrift shop in a seedy part of town with drug-addicted mannequins in the window. The rats keep nibbling on their plastic toes. Autumn leaves blow in each time someone opens the door. The discounted nightgowns hover on the rack. They look like souls made of silk, souls shivering in moonlight with easy-to-wash instructions. This isn't my real life, the salesgirl assures me. I stand there, nodding my head. It's not my real life either. Outside, over the rooftops, the moon hangs in the sky like a silver medal, as if the world won second prize in a contest. Moving on to my third collection called Natural Capital, I'll read a poem called We're Not Your Shoes Anymore. We're not your shoes anymore. Understand, those days are gone. I'm not exactly sure what we are, but we don't walk, we don't run. Is that clear? Look, you'll never put another foot inside us. Sure, we still have laces. Who doesn't? But you'll never knot us. Never. We're going to start wearing you from now on. Understand, things have changed. It's your turn to hang dangling from the overhead power lines. The next poem is about a famous Kingston landmark called Hotel du Hospital Café. We couldn't tell if it was a hospital or a coffee shop. All the linen tablecloths were stained with blood, coffee, and dried up tears. The waitress was dressed like a nurse. She brought us 2 cappuccinos and said we didn't have long to live. My fourth poetry collection is called Hard Work Cheering Up Sad Machines, and I'll read the title poem. Hard Work Cheering Up Sad Machines. It's easy to breathe if you're breathing. Breathe all you want. The air is too old and weak to run away. Your life is a gift with your name on it, a word there's no word for. Breathe all you want. It's easy to breathe if you're breathing. The air is an all-you-can-breathe buffet. It's hard work cheering up sad machines. Hard work cleaning a numbers cage. Our heartbeats are staggered staples holding us together. Birds sing like kettles, boiling song water. Your life is a gift with your name on it, and your life is a word there's no word for. Breathe all you want. Breathe all you want. Next poem I'll read is called Yield, and it's interesting. The word yield has a couple of definitions. It means to give way to demands or pressure, but it also means to produce or provide. And in this poem, I try to reconcile those two definitions to reflect how we can give way and grow at the same time. Yield. Our yield is now. This moment is what will eventually become of us. Our only harvest is the one we're gathering. Water is drawn by the one with the well. Whoever has lungs will breathe in and out. The one with the horse will ride into town. Everything is nothing but horns honking at death, and numbers attacking numbers. Apricot jam stuck on the table knife. Everything is nothing but almonds divided by almonds, and grass blades savoring our shadow champagne. A car without wheels crawling through mud. Why does everyone seek refuge elsewhere? Whoever has the orange will peel the skin. Whoever has a thread will feed the needle. The one with enough footsteps will walk to the store. Our only harvest is the one we're gathering. This moment is what will eventually become of us. Our yield is now. As poet laureate for the city of Kingston, I write poems every year for the mayor's levy. I'll read one of the poems I wrote for that event. It's called Civil Twilight. Civil twilight is a scientific term, and it describes the brightest moment of twilight. The sun is already below the horizon, but the light from the sun still lights up the sky. And I thought that was just a beautiful image. As we reach the end of something and the darkness is growing, there's still that little bit of light hanging on, taking its time. So that was on my mind when I wrote the poem, Civil Twilight. Yesterday went for a walk in the dark. It won't ever return. I don't know where I've gone, it said. Its voice traveled far as light from a star. It took years to hear. The past is no longer what or how it was. The fallen snow can't say why it fell. Our silent bell has forgotten its sound. Lost river, we followed your flow. Now show us where we go from here. Feel free, tired day, to rest your head. The sky will darken, wondering what's next. In this blue hour of sundown, civil twilight, remind us to witness tonight the light that's left. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Now I'm going to read some new material from a manuscript I'm currently working on. The manuscript is called Scrambled Wonderland, and it consists of untitled prose poems. Some of them contain surreal images or dreamlike narratives. Others are just plain strange. There's a quotation from Novellis that I had in the back of my mind while working on these poems. Novellis was an 18th century German poet, mystic, and philosopher of early German Romanticism. And the quotation is the following: "Our life is no dream, but it ought to become one, and perhaps will." With those words in mind, let's dive into Scrambled Wonderland. To whom? To whom it may concern, in my current role as a log burning in your fire pit, I believe I have the skills needed to be a wisp of black smoke and would like to apply for a position in your sky. Last night, a deep-fried chicken wing dreamt it was still alive and cried, "Life soldiers on." On the bus, I overheard someone say, "Even dead leaves look and sound leaf-like if there's enough wind." Birds are buckets of song raised from a well. The moon is a bucket of light. Pet speck of dust, where's your leash? Let's go for a walk. This evening at the bus stop, pale steam rose from my coffee cup, spreading its wings like a blind white bat from the mouth of a styrofoam cave. Not everything that breaks needs to be repaired or replaced. Lend us a puddle for our rain. Let us borrow another tomorrow, another parade, another gently lost paddle for the bottom of our lake. The moon is leaving town, having a yard sale in the sky. selling its gently used light. The orange people are peeled by the hand people. A rain person disappears into the gutter person. At the end of the day, a bicycle beast is chained to the street lamp. Good morning, butchers, washing your hands in our hearts. Good night, dark empty shoe, hopping through the woods. I had a pet thought. I had a pet thought. It lived in my head. One night, it escaped. I didn't know what to think. A few days later, I thought it came back, but I was wrong. It was just a memory of my pet thought, pretending nothing happened. In the only world. In the only world I ever lived in, I learned a horse's skeleton has one less bone than a human skeleton, and an ounce of pain on earth weighs the same as an ounce of earth. I saw someone's chimney smoke rise like the gray spirit of a dead shoelace. Some of what I did, I wanted to do. Some of what I said, I meant. My own beaten heart knew happiness like the back of its hand. But what I truly miss most is seeing the crowded city buses drift like clouds, carrying human rain, human snow. I went back to school. I went back to school after many years, but the building was empty, abandoned. I asked a 100-year-old rat for directions to my class. No talking in the halls, the rat replied. I wandered around, lost, rediscovering the past, studying the forgotten fingerprints left behind on a cloudy mirror. After my lessons, I learned that most flies die in a spider's web, but lots of spiders die there too. Today is a hoax, our history teacher said. Yesterday is still happening. He proved it by emptying one of his pockets, and he was right. It held yesterday's crumbs, yesterday's lint. I hate to be the one. I hate to be the one telling you this, but you're okay. Go back to sleep. Your shoes are polished and walking along Main Street as if you had feet. And the wind outside is just a rumor started by unsteady trees. The body. The body is the envelope, and the spirit is a letter within. Or the spirit is the envelope, and the body is within, the Office Depot sales clerk told me in the stationery aisle. Either way, the letter gives the envelope purpose. Without the letter, the envelope has nothing to envelop. I asked the clerk what happens next, but he didn't know. He called his manager over to explain. Well, when the letter slips into the envelope and the envelope is sealed, they are one, the manager said. And as one, they move through the world and reach another. The manager wasn't sure how things worked from there. He advised me to call head office. For the letter to fully be received, the envelope must be opened, the seal broken, a voice from head office whispered to me over the phone. And that's pretty much how the journey always ends, open, broken, in someone's hands. The snow removal truck. The snow removal truck got stuck in my driveway today. The driver stepped out, shoveled snow from the wheels, and tried again, but no luck. The wheels kept spinning. His friend came to help and got stuck. His friend's friend showed up, more friends. His family, distant relatives, many others from his past, all arrived and got stuck, hundreds of them. I sensed by their campfires, tents, and flags that they would never leave, and that I'd have no choice but to live among them and learn their stuck ways. I waited for the day to end, for evening to fall, but it never did. This is our tomorrow, the driver's cousin said. But what will we do when yesterday comes? I asked. He shook his head and said yesterday is a mystery. No one knows what it will bring. Did I ever tell you? Did I ever tell you about the time the telephone rang with a wrong number? An old woman trying to reach the Ambassador Hotel requested I connect her to room 412. No one had ever asked me to do that before. I didn't know how to connect a call. I wasn't even sure where the Ambassador Hotel was. The old woman sensed my confusion. She asked if I was new, and I said I was. She wondered if there was anyone else around to help. I said no, there wasn't. I was the only one here. I'll call back later when you're not so alone, she said, and hung up. I never heard from her again. In the end, the crumb and the ant will become best friends, and the spoon will return every sip of soup it stole from the bowl. The earthworm will meet the bird halfway. A kernel of corn will remember its boiled cob, but the walnut will never return to its shell. The hook will never get along with the fish. Even though they have nothing against each other, our mistakes and our erasers will fight to the death. There was a knock. There was a knock at the door. I opened it. I saw a person. I still heard the knocking. It came from inside the person. I opened the person. There was a heart. I pressed my ear against it and heard knocking within. I opened the heart. I saw a door, another door, and another. It was like a village of tiny doors living inside the heart. Please don't tell anyone we're here, one of the doors said. We have nowhere else to go. We carried chairs. We carried chairs with us everywhere we went. Distant music played in the air. Birds sang in the trees. The river babbled in its bed. If the music stopped, we had to sit. I was lucky. My chair was a lightweight plastic patio piece, easy to move. My father carried a heavy wooden rocking chair. He struggled with every step. The last time I saw him, he'd been dead 2 years, but still looked the same. The music never stopped. And maybe that's a good place for me to stop. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure for me to have this chance to share my poems with you. I hope you all take good care, and I wish everyone the best. Thank you.
Thank you to Kit Roffey, Síle Englert, and Jason Heroux for such great readings, and thanks to everyone in our audience for watching. A reminder that Síle's book, The Lost Time Accidents, published by Goose Lane Editions, and Jason's book, Hard Work Cheering Up Sad Machines, published by Mansfield Press, are available for purchase through the links in the video description below. Thank you for joining us. Antler River Poetry will be returned to live Zoom events on March 23rd with our next feature poets, Shalin Jodri and Charlie Patch.